There are no magic words. Of all of the phrases that I type when I am responding to emails that come to tappingqanda.com, that might be the single phrase I use the most. And the reason why I use that phrase is because often when people are sending me emails, they're saying, Gene, what is the perfect tapping phrases for insert issue? And I appreciate this desire to find the exact right words because most of us, when we learn tapping or we're working with our practitioner, the vocabulary that they use when they're guiding us through tapping feels so perfect, feels so powerful. And as we're tapping, it creates such profound relief. We want to find those magic words too. But the reality is the words aren't magic. The way we create transformation with tapping is tuning into an issue and providing stimulus, and that's where the relief is. And the words are just one tool to do that. So much so, one of my favorite ways to tap is using no words at all. And so today what we're going to do is we're actually going to dive into wordless tapping and a new way of describing it that was new to me over the course of the last couple of weeks. And I'm going to share with you a number of ways to use it so you can create transformation so much easier every single day. This is Gene Monterastelli, and welcome to the Tapping Q&A podcast recorded live to tape from Williamsburg in Brooklyn. This is episode 622, originally aired July 31st, 2024. Hi, everyone. I hope this finds you well wherever you are and whatever time of day you're getting a chance to listen to this. Thanks for spending a little time with me today. Now, a couple of weeks ago when we were doing the 24 hours of tapping, I learned a couple of new phrases and a couple of new pieces of vocabulary. And so one of those phrases that I learned that I hadn't heard before, but obviously was in the transformational space because a number of my friends used it, was contentless intervention or contentless tapping. Now, for me, I have always referred to that as just wordless tapping because I'm tapping without words. But because of this frame, because of this idea of contentless tapping, that's actually done with intention. I'm not just tapping without words, but there's an intention there. It transformed my relationship to tapping without words. So today what I'm going to do is I'm going to share with you a whole bunch of ways that I love to use contentless tapping and how you can integrate them in right now into your transformational practice. Now, if you are watching this and you have no idea what I'm talking about, and you're new to this whole tapping thing, tapping is this absolutely amazing tool. It's something I use every single day in my own transformation. It's something that I use consistently with my clients. If you'd like to learn the basics of tapping, all you need to do is go to learntotap.com. If you follow the little red arrow in the upper right-hand corner, it will take you to learntotap.com. It will show you the basics. And so after you watch that little introductory video, the things I'm going to share with you today, you're going to be able to use right away. This idea of contentless intervention or contentless tapping really transformed, like I said, my relationship to tapping without words. And the reason why that name changed my relationship is because I recognized that not saying words was done with deliberate intent in some settings. So for example, in TTT, the trauma tapping technique that my friends at the Peaceful Heart Network use, it is a wordless intervention for two reasons. Number one, they're in a setting where oftentimes it's a group, and it might not be appropriate to be saying phrases out loud. And number two, because of the dramatically traumatized nature of the clients that they are working with, having them say phrases, having them describe their experience isn't providing relief, but it's actually an opportunity for the people they are working with to be re-traumatized. So it's actually safer to be tapping without words in that setting. So they're not bringing the content of their experience to the forefront, because they want to provide the relief and transformation in a much safer way. And the beautiful part of tapping is relief and transformation can come from that. Now, it is a different type of transformational experience. The healing might happen at a different rate and in a different way, but that doesn't invalidate it. Because sometimes moving really, really quickly, because of the context, isn't safe. Because of the skill of the practitioner, because of the context and the emotional state of the person who's receiving it, because, like I said, the nature of the trauma. And so moving in a slower, gentler way is actually safer and healthier in the long term, even though it might take a little more time. For me, I'm always going to err on the side of safety with my clients. For me, I'm going to err on the side of making sure we do this healing well, which means that I am okay with going slower. Now, just because I'm saying that, it doesn't mean contentless tapping or wordless tapping is something that isn't powerful. Like I said, I tap every day, but I actually tap wordlessly every single day. It is typically the first thing I do at the beginning of the day. It is typically the last thing I do at the end of the day. And it's something that happens throughout the day. And so what I'm going to do is I want to share with you 8 different ways that you can use tapping in a contentless way, where we're just tapping, but we're not doing it without intention, that has a huge, huge difference in the way that we create transformation. Number 1, to start the day. So for me, I typically start my day with some tapping. Now, I might get up, I might stretch a little bit, but usually within that first 10 or 15 minutes, I am using tapping to start my day. And so when I'm doing this, the way I do this is I do it in a wordless fashion, and I set a timer on my watch, somewhere between 3 and 5 minutes, depending on the day. And what I do is I just start to tap. But I'm not just mindlessly tapping as groggy-headed in the morning. Instead, for me, what I'm doing is I am just scanning my system. I am just noticing what is going on. And before I begin, as I tap on the side of the hand, I just start scanning from the tippy top of my head, and I work all the way through my system. If I'm seated, one of the things I really make sure is I get past my hips. Because if I'm seated and I'm scanning my body, I usually get to the bend at my hips and I stop. And so as I'm moving from point to point, all I'm doing is just noticing what is going on in my system. And after I've scanned it from top to bottom, then I am in a circumstance where I then just notice. Is there heaviness? Is there tightness? Is there constriction? Is there my body off in any particular way? But that's just it. I am just noticing. I'm not reframing. I'm not trying to create transformation. I'm not trying to change anything. I am just noticing what is going on inside of my system. Now, oftentimes when I do this, insight and information come bubbling forward. So I always make sure as I'm tapping that I have a pen nearby so I can take some notes and write down what is coming up. But to start the day, I am just tapping without words, and I am just noticing. Number 2, to end the day. Now, it's very, very similar at the end of the day. Again, set a timer on watch, 3 to 5 minutes. And again, just scan my system and just move from point to point. And what's interesting, even though I'm not doing this super deliberately, just because the nature of the rhythms of the day, when I'm tapping in the morning, I'm almost imagining the system coming alive as I'm noticing, energy coming in as I engage with the day. When I tap at the end of the day, it's just the opposite. There is a sense of release and let go and calming and powering down and relaxing. And you'll notice I'm not thinking about the day. I'm not processing through what happened. I'm not trying to understand and reframe and come up with anything new. All I'm doing is I'm just noticing. And because it's the end of the day, that notice is a sense of release. Because it's the end of the day, that notice is a sense of letting go. And oh my gosh, do I feel so much better? And oh my gosh, is it so much easier to gently fall asleep and to sleep better? Number 3, when I don't know what to say. Oftentimes we sit down and like, oh, I want to do some tapping and I have this thing going on and I want to work on it. And where is the place that I start? And if I don't know, I don't know. And that's okay. And so again, I just start tapping without focusing on anything other than the fact that I know that I want to be tapping in this particular moment. And again, I am not being diagnostic. I'm not going, what is the things I need to be saying at this particular moment? Again, I know that I want to tap. I know that I don't know what to say. And so I just tap and notice and tap and notice and tap and notice. And again, like you're going to see this theme as we run through all of these things. The sense of being contentless is not without direction. I'm being fully present to what's going on. And oftentimes when I don't know what to say, the words start to come up. Like this can particularly happen when I'm angry. And at the beginning, I'm just like, "Arr." And then all of a sudden, I am so angry. I am so angry. I am so angry because. And so I'm not seeking words. I'm not tapping without words so that the words start showing up. But instead, what's happening is as I tap, as I process, as the tapping does that amazing stuff inside of us biochemically and emotionally, clarity starts to show up. I was working with a client over the weekend, and we started and we were tapping in a wordless way because of a bunch of stuff that was going on. And after doing a couple of rounds of tapping, I go, "What do you notice?" And she goes, "Well, this is the worry and this is the anxiety and this is the shame." And she literally pointed to the places that these things had landed. And again, when I was leading her in the tapping, there was no instruction. It was just notice. Tap and notice, tap and notice, and the clarity showed up. So then we knew what we wanted to tap on because it showed up in that way. So if you don't know what to say, that's okay. Tap, and tap in a way where we're noticing, but we don't have the agenda of I'm tapping so things show up. Because what will happen, and you're going to feel better. Number 4, I love tapping in a contentless way to start a tapping session. Because oftentimes, so there's a number of ways that I tap. Beginning of the day, end of the day, an emotion comes up in the middle of the day I'm trying to practice or trying to manage. But mostly, once or twice a week, what I do is I sit down and I'm going to do some work on whatever the big issue is in my life. So I'm actually sitting down with the intention of this is a transformation I'm trying to have. And I find that I'm going to do it. I regularly do it on a Tuesday evening after work, or I do it on a Saturday afternoon, even when I know it's time for me to sit down, because I scheduled it to make sure it happens. I'm not fully present to the work that is in front of me. And sometimes it's hard to move from being in my daily life to all of a sudden being present to the tapping of what's going on. And so as a way of just calming and letting go and making myself present, again, I set my watch for 3 minutes and I just let my fingers do the walking. And I just tap from point to point to point, from point to point to point, so that it makes it so much easier for me to be able to be present. Because again, simply stimulating those points is going to create relaxation, is going to create calm, is going to create some space so I can have clarity. So when I sit down to tap, that tapping is going to be more effective. Number 5, anytime I'm in a public setting and I want to do some tapping, and I don't want to be going and mumbling to myself while I'm doing that particular thing. Now, oftentimes when I'm doing this in public, I'm not like doing the full tapping thing. One of the beautiful things about being in New York City, when you're sitting on the subway, like if I'm tapping, I'm like the 9th weirdest thing on the subway and people barely even notice, and New Yorkers won't make eye contact, and it's not that big of a deal. But sometimes we're in a circumstance where we might feel a little self-conscious, but we want to do some tapping. And so we can just under the table, tap on the side of the hand, be in a circumstance where we're just scratching our collarbone or just rubbing there where it just looks like we're working out a knot. But giving ourselves permission in a public setting to do a little tapping that, again, I don't have to be worrying about anything else because sometimes I'm self-conscious about doing it, or I don't know what to say and I just know I need to do a little tapping. And so give yourself permission to wordlessly tap as you are in public, as you are worried about something. Number 6, if we're dealing with something that's really, really emotional, sometimes even when I'm sitting in my office by myself, knowing that nobody is watching, I don't feel super comfortable saying what I'm feeling, articulating what I'm feeling. And part of that's embarrassment, and part of it might be I'm afraid that if I go there, I'm going to go there. I'm going to open up this fire hydrant and emotion is just going to come pouring out. And so when I'm super, super emotional, I just tap because I'm tuned in. You know, you might be familiar with the SUD scale. A SUD scale is like the subjective unit of distress. And so if someone's really, really sad, 0 to 10, how sad are you? We're trying to figure out how sad they are. If I'm talking to someone who is crying, I don't have to have them tune into their sadness. They don't need to give me a SUDS rating 0 to 10 in order for us to be effective in what's going on. They're fully present to what's going on. The way tapping is successful is we tune into what is going on and then we provide stimulus. That's the reason why we use phrases. They're to help us to tune in. But if you're in a situation where you're already super, super emotional, phrases are not necessary. Just tap. Just be present to what's there and just tap. And again, I'm not trying to reframe. I'm not trying to provide insight. I'm not trying to transform. I am just noticing the emotion and tapping. And I'm just noticing the emotion and tapping. And I'm just noticing the emotion and tapping. And as I do that, things will become clear. Things will become clear. Things will become clear. And then if I want to introduce words, I can do that. But I don't have to until I have to. Number 7, when there are so many things going on, you don't know where to start. One of the things that I love doing when I'm working with clients, I'm like, well, as you tune into this thing, I want you to notice the constellation of emotions that you're feeling. And oftentimes I just get you can just see in the corner of their mouth a little smile of acknowledgement. Because so often we say, so how do you feel? We feel like we're supposed to give a single answer. I am happy, I am sad, I'm overwhelmed, I'm disappointed. Where sometimes I can be a lot of those things. I can be overwhelmed and frustrated and scared and sad and angry and all of those things at once. And they're not clear emotions. They're this giant constellation of emotions. And so it can be really intimidating and overwhelming to sit down and tap if I don't have an entry point. It's just kind of like, oh, there, and I don't know where to go. And so if I'm ever in a circumstance where I have multiple emotions and I don't know which one to start with and I don't know what the leading edge is, again, I tune into the constellation and I tap. And I tune into the constellation as I tap. And typically as I do that, it moves from like this gaseous, amorphous cloud and it starts to have clarity. And it starts to have edges. And it starts to have an epicenter. And then as I do that, I might end up in a circumstance where it creates some clarity, where it creates some space. And I now, this is the place I want to continue my focus as I'm tapping. And so if you have lots of things going on, don't try and figure out where to start. Just start. And as you start and you notice, you will find your way to see what you need to be focusing on. And then number 8, just because. It is so powerful just to tap on those tapping points. It is so powerful to create release. In the evening when I'm watching old TV, I'm doing something like that, I will just go up to my collarbone and I will just tap. And I'll go to the side of my hand and I'll tap. And I'm not like trying to process whatever television show or movie that I'm watching. I'm not trying to learn lessons and decompress my day. We know that simply stimulating these points create relief. Some of the very first research studies that showed the value and power of tapping was stimulating these points created a reduction of cortisol in the blood level and in saliva. It could be measured tangibly. And so simply stimulating these points creates transformation. Simply stimulating these points make us feel better. So if you are sitting somewhere and you feel safe and you feel comfortable, do a little wordless tapping just because. So there you go. There are 8 different ways that you can do wordless tapping, or what we like to call content-free tapping, as a way of just setting up and going in there. And these are not the only 8 ways to do it. They're 8 of the ways that I like to do on the regular. And I find that when I take a list like this and I put it out and I lay it out and I name the things, I am much more likely to use it because I remember, I'm in this setting and just doing a little tapping is useful. The most important lesson I want you to take away from this is stimulating these points, doing a little tapping is going to make you feel a little bit better. It's not going to solve every problem in the world. Sometimes, and this happened to me a couple of weeks ago, I sat down and I tapped without words, and I sat here and I cried and I tapped without words. And when I was done, 0 things changed in my life. I had the same struggles, I had the same obstacles, I had the same things that were in front of me that I had to solve. But I felt better in my response to those particular things. Tapping on the points without words is not going to make you sprout wings and fly away and solve every single problem in your life. But it is going to make it a little easier and it is going to make it a little better. So give yourself permission to recognize that tapping is a valuable tool. And there are lots of contexts that I can use it where I don't have to work very hard. I don't have to come up with magic phrases. I can just be present and it will make a difference. If you know someone in your life who could use some encouragement to do some wordless tapping, or this is a great way to introduce tapping to them, please be our ambassador, pass it along. Don't spam your inbox and send it to everybody in the world. But there might be one person who could use this today that you know. And the best part is, if you send them this and they consume it, great. And if they don't, great. Because you've reached out to them and you said, I'm thinking of you today, and I think your day will be better because of this. And because they know one person is thinking of them, their day is better. I know that sounds cheesy. It feels cheesy every single time I say it, but I also know it to be true. Reach out to someone and tell them you're thinking about them today. Now, as you look at your screen right now, you can see a playlist of the entire podcast archive. Click on that, watch an old episode. Make sure you continue to tap, and I look forward to talking to you and tapping with you again real soon.